there are a lot of problems with our school system.
Our education system is broken.
That is a crisis that is impacting school systems in both urban areas and rural areas.
The United States has the worst educational system known to science.
Think back to your earliest days in school, how you were told to follow instructions like sit at your desk, take out your books, read pages 30 to 59, and then the bell rings, telling you it's time to leave one room and go to another one. In school, you're rewarded for doing exactly as you're told. You learn the same generic information as your classmates, at the same time, and in exactly the same way as everyone else. Your individual gifts and interests are ignored. And we know this type of learning doesn't work because when you measure how much students remember from a test, in many cases, they've forgotten 50 to 80% of what they've learned the next day after their exam. And a huge part of that is that after the test is over, we don't actively use that information in any meaningful way. We just move on to the next exam and repeat the whole thing again. It's no wonder then that most of us never reach our full potential. But what if we learned in a different way? What if we looked at the individual gifts of each person, coming up with a customized path for each of us to succeed? And what if, by doing this, you could tap into your own unique genius? Because no two people are exactly the same. You are a one-of-a-kind combination of strengths, gifts, and talents, things that no one else has. And if you're going to make the most of them, it's up to you to develop it. So how do you do that? In 2012, Robert Greene released a book called Mastery, where he looked at the lives of some of the greatest masters in history: Mozart, Einstein, and contemporary masters like the robotics engineer Yoky Matsuoka and the artist Teresita Fernandez. What he found were many similarities in the way they gained mastery and found their unique calling. What was their secret? Greene writes that the key to mastery is understanding that it's in you to learn on a much deeper level, but you have to put yourself through a process of complete inner transformation. In this video, we'll look at the basic process Greene sets out in his book, Mastery, which you can use to access your most powerful gifts. Greene writes that many of the great masters in history confessed to a feeling of being guided by a sense of destiny, a powerful force that drove them in the form of a calling, pushing them to follow their life's task. We looked at callings in detail in this video, but to understand the power of your calling, let's look at the remarkable story of Temple Grandin. After she was born in 1947, her mother had no idea why she wasn't talking.
When I was a little kid, I was very autistic, nonverbal, rocking. That's the kind of kid they just put away in the institution.
Doctors diagnosed Grandin with autism, which wasn't well understood in those years, and the medical advice at the time was to send her to an institution, something her mother desperately wanted to avoid. But instead, they took her to a neurologist and speech therapist, which was unheard of at the time. And under their care, Grandin slowly learned how to speak. But even still, many experts said that her future would be very limited, at best. When Grandin started school, she had trouble socializing with the other children, who bullied her for being different. It was a dark time in her life. But whenever she felt anxious, she would naturally go to the two things she loved most: spending time with animals and spending time building things with her hands. Her life took a dramatic turn when she visited a ranch in Arizona. She felt an instant connection with the animals there, and it completely changed her life. For hours, she would watch the cattle in their feedlots and squeeze chutes. Over time, she came to understand them in a way that no one else could. She noticed, for example, that just by paying attention to where their ears were pointing, you could also tell what they were looking at. She began to read about these animals, and she found that she could read for hours without getting bored. Over time, her interests would expand to psychology, biology, and other areas. Remarkably, she went on to pursue a master's degree in animal sciences at Arizona State University. It was here that she returned to her childhood interest in cattle in a completely new way. It was to build a new type of cattle chute that wasn't just more efficient than the ones in the market, but more humane and more comfortable for the animals. To accomplish this, she transformed herself into a captivating speaker on animals and on autism. All of this happened because Grandin noticed what Greene calls a primal curiosity. It's a powerful urge to understand something. It resonates deeply inside of us like an obsession, because it's not necessarily the most intelligent people that reach mastery. It's often those who are driven at an emotional level. It compels them to think about the same questions day after day, to go to bed thinking and dreaming about that problem, and to wake up energized, ready to tackle it again. What this reveals is that even the things you might think of as a weakness can be the key to your calling. And whatever it is, your calling isn't something to be ignored or dismissed as not practical enough. It's actually essential to creating a life that's aligned with who you are. Scott Adams, the creator of Dilbert, once wrote that everyone has at least a few areas where they could be in the top 25% with some effort. In Adams' case, he can draw better than most people, but even he admits that he's not that great compared to other artists. And he's funnier than most people, but again, he's not exceptionally funny compared to other comedians. But what he's done is found a way to combine his drawing ability with his love for writing jokes in a way that's unique, and which has allowed him to rise to the top of his field, where there's much less competition. So resist the temptation to be just like everyone else. Instead, ask yourself, how can you leverage the things that make you different? It's never too late to stop and ask, does the direction I'm moving in now feel authentic to who I am? And if it doesn't, what can I do to move towards something that does? As you begin to explore, trust yourself that one step at a time, you will find an opportunity that fits you so well that it sparks a childlike wonder deep inside of you. Once you've heard your calling, you can move on to the next stage. Greene writes that when we look at the great masters in history, we find a time in their lives when they're training. They're working in a kind of self-directed apprenticeship, and they're quietly developing their skills for about 5 to 10 years. And throughout this time, no one pays much attention to them because they haven't achieved anything yet. They don't seem all that different from anyone else. And yet, just below the surface, they're changing in ways we can't see, and in ways that carry all the seeds of their future success. Take, for example, the Renaissance artist Leonardo Da Vinci. Born in 1452, he was the illegitimate son of a notary. Since he was born out of wedlock, he would never inherit the family estate, and he couldn't go to university or practice any of the noble professions of his time. He couldn't even take on his father's name, known only as Leonardo from Vinci. His future seemed bleak. So as a child, he was left mostly on his own. He spent hours exploring nature, finding all sorts of animals, plants, and insects, and then he would sit and draw all of the beautiful details that were all around him. In his teens, he began to work in the studio of the artist Andrea del Verrocchio, and by age 17, he was accepted as an apprentice. Verrocchio's studio was active in all kinds of different projects, from painting to sculpture and the casting of metal cannons and bells. It was here that he gained training not only in the arts, but also the basics of engineering and mechanics. He trained with Verrocchio for 7 years, and it was precisely this training that held the beginnings of the beautiful paintings he would make and the amazing inventions he would build in the years to come. This is consistent with research that shows that it's not just the number of years of practice that makes the difference, it's how you practice. The psychologist K. Anders Ericsson, a pioneer in what's come to be known as deliberate practice, argued that focused attention is what's essential for mastery. The key is to stay engaged in what you're doing, trying to get better each time you repeat it. Without this level of continual focus, we stop getting better, and our skills stagnate. We can see this constant drive for improvement in the way that Leonardo practiced his craft. There's accounts of him spending hours drawing fabric in a candlelit room, capturing all the ways the light and shadows bounced off the delicate folds. He would then move the candles to a new position where the lights and shadows changed, but everything else about the fabric stayed the same. And then he would draw it again, often drawing the same thing from many different angles. It was in this way that he began to master the interplay of light and shade in his paintings. And while an average artist might try to draw exactly what they see with their eyes, Leonardo painted with the mind, with a much deeper understanding of the principles of nature. It was with this goal in mind that he studied anatomy, proportions, and movement. He was obsessed with capturing this sense of motion, making his paintings come alive, and he was always experimenting with new techniques and ideas. No one forced him to do any of this. It all came from his own curiosity, his obsessive drive for excellence. And it was through this practice that he gained a reputation as someone who could master anything he put his mind to. Deliberate practice means taking whatever it is you want to learn, breaking down the overall process into smaller parts, learning each of the individual pieces, and then continually practicing at more and more challenging levels so that you get a little bit better each time you do it, integrating your learning one step at a time. By the time Leonardo finished his apprenticeship, he'd already spent tens of thousands of hours in deep and deliberate practice. By the age of 20, he qualified as a master in the Guild of St. Luke. But Leonardo wasn't a perfect genius. Throughout his life, he battled with perfectionism, and he struggled to meet deadlines. Much of his work remained unfinished. But given what little he had, his low social position and his lack of formal education, he accomplished so much more than anyone could have imagined. And he only had a tiny fraction of the information and the resources that we take for granted today. So what does all this mean for you? It means that there's a structure you can follow. Greene says that all apprenticeships move through 3 phases. The first phase is deep observation. This is where you watch and absorb the most basic concepts of your craft. Once you've understood them, then you move on to acquiring skills, where you begin the work of learning the most fundamental core activities, which then serve as the foundation for all your later learning. It's also at this stage where you develop focus and discipline. In a world where most of us are constantly distracted, just being able to focus gives you a tremendous advantage. Once you've learned the basic skills of your craft, now you're ready to experiment. It's here that you begin to actively combine all the skills you've learned in ways that are unique to you. And as you do that, you will reach a state of flow. Flow is sometimes described as a feeling of effortless action, where you're so immersed in what you're doing, so present in the moment, that everything else seems to fade into the background. Time seems to pass in an instant. It's an altered state of consciousness, where you're calm, relaxed, and alert, and yet you're still performing at an incredibly high level. When we first start learning a new skill, we have to consciously think about every step. But as you continue to practice, all of that thinking gets moved into the subconscious, and over time, your mind optimizes every detail. The psychologist Mihai Csikszentmihalyi is widely regarded as the pioneer in flow research. When he asked people to describe what it felt like to perform at their best, they described feeling a state of perfect focus, being totally absorbed in what they were doing, where every action they made seemed to move effortlessly into the next. What's amazing about this is that the flow experience is available to everyone. It's universal in all of us. The author and researcher Stephen Kotler says that we are hardwired for peak performance, and the happiest people who score on the highest levels of well-being are those who have these flow experiences the most often. One of the biggest keys to triggering flow states is to practice at the point where what you're doing seems just slightly beyond what you're comfortable with, where it's just challenging enough that it's at the edge of your skill level. What separates masters is this willingness to go beyond the point of frustration and to embrace the possibility that you could fail. Because when it comes down to it, there's really only 2 kinds of failure. The first kind comes from never trying at all. Maybe you're afraid, or maybe you're waiting for the perfect time to start. But this kind of failure, you will never learn from, and it'll destroy any chance you have at reaching your potential. But the second kind of failure comes when you're brave enough to try things you've never done. Because even if you fail, whatever short-term embarrassment you might feel in the moment is hugely outweighed by what you end up learning. There's a saying that the difference between a beginner and a master is that the master has failed more times than the beginner has even tried. It's absolutely true. And it's this willingness to continually fail and keep trying that's the hallmark of mastery. Greene writes that there are no geniuses who come out of nowhere fully formed without a long period of training, where their skills are slowly being developed, because all of this requires patience. Some people bring up Mozart or Einstein as examples of the instant genius. But Mozart didn't write an original piece of music until well after 10 years of practicing. And Einstein came up with his first revolutionary theory of relativity only after 10 years of starting his serious thought experiments at the age of 16. It takes at least 10 years of concentrated practice to produce a great work. As you go through these stages, recognize that the goal of your apprenticeship isn't money or status. The goal is the complete inner transformation of your mind and your character, to move yourself from a complete beginner who's scattered and impatient into a serious practitioner with discipline and focus. If there's one thing you can do to speed up your progress, it's to find a good mentor who can help you focus your practice and give you valuable feedback, saving you years of making needless mistakes. But otherwise, there's no shortcuts to mastery, and the very desire to find one will undermine any chance you have at reaching your fullest potential. Having said that, every apprenticeship comes to an end. When you feel that there's nothing left to learn where you are, then you'll know that your apprenticeship is over and that it's time to move on to the next stage. George Bernard Shaw once wrote that we don't stop playing because we grow old. We grow old because we stop playing. One of the great gifts of childhood is that we naturally love to play. It's a time where we're endlessly curious and open to new ideas. But at the same time, a child's creativity is limited. They lack focus and discipline. It's here that the master combines the best of both worlds. They retain that childhood curiosity and sense of play, but by applying it to their work, they also add to it years of apprenticeship, skill, and experience. The natural endpoint of following your calling is that you find yourself at a place where your conscious, rational mind meets intuition. Greene writes that many of the great masters in history describe a feeling of being possessed by heightened intuitive powers after spending years in their field. Take, for example, Magnus Carlsen, who's considered the #1 chess player in the world. When asked how he decides how to make a chess move, he says that most of the time, I just know what to do. I don't have to sit and calculate what the right move is. Usually, I just feel it immediately. It's the ability to know something so instantaneously that you don't need to consciously work through all the steps. Many chess masters have described this feeling of high-level intuition, where their years of practice have given way to strong traces of memory and pattern recognition. At some point, they internalize the whole process. They no longer see the game as a set of separate parts the way a beginner would. Instead, they gain an intuitive feel for how everything fits together as one harmonious whole, fully harnessing the power of the subconscious mind. Greene writes that high-level intuition is the ultimate sign of mastery, and our minds naturally want to move to it, to see and understand the incredible connections between everything we experience in this world. We saw the culmination of this in the Renaissance, where masters sought to combine art and science, who looked to connect all branches of knowledge into a single unified and coherent whole. But today, we often find the opposite. The world is facing problems it's never faced in its history. We desperately need you to develop your gifts, and if you're persistent, you will find a path that fits you. If you enjoyed this, I'd absolutely love it if you pressed the like button and left a comment with a chess piece emoji. As always, thanks so much for watching, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one.